Nadia Coleman had polished the same brass door handle 3 times, not because it needed it, but because staying near the study meant she could hear if the shouting inside turned into something worse. The mansion sat heavy and silent around her, all dark wood and marble that swallowed sound, except in this one room, where Jun Ho Kang's voice had dropped to the register that made grown men flinch. She had worked in this house for 8 months, long enough to know the difference between his business voice and the one he used when someone had made a mistake he intended to correct personally. Tonight was the second kind. The study door opened before she could step back, and Jun Ho filled the frame the way he filled every room he stood in, not through size, though he was tall, but through the stillness that clung to him even mid-motion. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the forearm, his tie discarded somewhere she could not see, and there was a thin line of red across one knuckle that he had not bothered to wipe away. "You," he said, looking directly at her, dark eyes catching the hallway light. "Nadia." She straightened, polishing cloth still in hand. "Sir, I need a wife. Now. Come with me." For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. That 8 months of quiet cleaning and quieter obedience had finally cracked something loose in her own head. But he was already walking, long strides eating up the hallway toward the east wing, clearly expecting her to follow, the way he expected everything in this house to fall into motion the instant he moved. "Sir, I don't understand." "You will," he said, not slowing. "There is a car outside in 6 minutes. My associates from the Han Consortium believe I am engaged. Tonight they arrive to confirm it with their own eyes. If they do not see a woman on my arm who behaves like she belongs there, 3 years of negotiation collapses, along with several people's lives, mine included. So get one of them." She gestured vaguely toward the wing where the men who guarded this house slept during the day. "One of your associates has a sister, a cousin, someone who actually agreed to this." Jun Ho stopped so abruptly, she nearly walked into his back. He turned, and for the first time that night his eyes actually settled on her instead of moving past her toward the next problem. "I do not trust anyone in that wing enough to hand them a lie this size," he said. "I have watched you for 8 months, Nadia Coleman. You are the only person in this house who has never once repeated something you overheard, and you notice everything. That is exactly what I need tonight. Someone smart enough not to break character, and someone I do not have to worry about selling me out by morning." "That's not the same as trust," Nadia said. "That's just you running out of options." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth, not quite amusement. Perhaps it is both. She should have refused. Every practical bone in her body told her to set down the polishing cloth, walk back to the servants' quarters, and let him solve his own crisis. But rent in the city did not care about her pride, and the money he was clearly about to offer, judging by the number already forming behind his eyes, was the kind of number that made refusal a luxury she did not have. "How much?" she said, "and what exactly am I agreeing to?" $10,000 for tonight. You stand beside me. You smile when necessary. You say nothing that is not required. In exchange, 3 men who currently want me dead decide instead that I am stable enough to continue doing business with. He held out his hand, not to shake hers, but simply extended, waiting. 6 minutes, Nadia. I need an answer, not a negotiation. She looked at his hand, at the thin red line still visible on his knuckle, at the absolute certainty in his face that she would say yes, because saying no had never occurred to him as a real possibility.
"Fine," she said.
"But if this gets me killed, I want it noted that I object." "Noted," Jun Ho said, and for just a second, something almost like relief crossed his face before the mask settled back into place. "There is a dress in the blue room. My assistant will do what she can with your hair in 4 minutes. Do not ask questions you do not need answered tonight. Simply exist beside me like you have always belonged there." The dress was midnight blue silk, clearly expensive, clearly not purchased with her in mind but altered with pins that a nervous woman named Rosalind fixed into place with shaking hands while reciting a list of names Nadia was supposed to memorize in 90 seconds. 2 guards. 3 consortium men. 1 wife who did not, until 11 minutes ago, exist. When Nadia descended the main staircase, Junho was waiting at the bottom in a black suit that had replaced the rolled sleeves and open collar, every trace of the harder man from the study smoothed away into something polished and dangerous in an entirely different register. His eyes moved over her once, controlled, assessing, and something in his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You look like you belong in this house," he said quietly, offering his arm. "I clean this house," Nadia said, taking it anyway. "There's a difference." "Not tonight," Junho said. "Tonight you own it." The Han Consortium men arrived exactly on schedule, 3 of them, led by a silver-templed man named Director Han who studied Nadia with the particular attention of someone pricing an object rather than meeting a person. She kept her spine straight, her smile measured, her hand resting on Junho's forearm the way a woman who had chosen this life 100 times over might rest it. "Your fiancée," Director Han said, "is not what I expected." "She rarely is what people expect," Junho said, and something in his voice carried an edge that made Director Han's eyes flick briefly toward him before returning to Nadia. "And where did the 2 of you meet?" Nadia felt the question land like a trap she had not been briefed for minutes of memorized names apparently insufficient for the improvisation now required of her. But she had spent years working in houses like this one, learning to read a room before it turned on her, and she answered before the silence could stretch too long. "He fired one of my coworkers for stealing," she said smoothly. "I was the only one willing to tell him the truth about who actually did it. He said he'd never met anyone in this city who didn't lie to him for convenience." Junho's hand tightened, just slightly, over hers where it rested on his arm, an almost invisible signal of approval. "She has never once lied to me," he said, and the strange thing was, it was not entirely a performance. Not entirely. Director Han studied them both a moment longer, then smiled the thin smile of a man deciding, for tonight at least, to believe what he was shown. A rare quality in this business. Perhaps rarer than loyalty itself. The rest of the evening passed in careful choreography, Nadia learning the rhythm of the lie as it unfolded, when to laugh at something that was not funny, when to lay her palm against Junho's chest in a gesture meant to look like affection, and instead sent an unwelcome heat climbing up her own arm. By the time the consortium men left, satisfied enough to shake Junho's hand and murmur something about revised terms, Nadia's understanding of the entire night had shifted into something she did not have a name for yet. "You did well," Junho said, once the door closed behind the last of them, his voice dropping back into the low register she recognized from before, minus the anger. "Better than well. I was terrified the entire time. You did not show it. Not once." He studied her the way he had on the staircase, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. "Most people in my world cannot do that. Fear leaks out of them no matter how they try to hide it. I had good motivation." She held up her hand, rubbing her thumb and fingers together in the universal gesture for money. "Of course," Junho said, and something about the flatness in his voice suggested he did not entirely believe that was the whole truth, though he did not push further. "Rosalind will bring your payment in the morning." "Thank you, Nadia." It should have ended there. A transaction completed, a debt paid, a strange night filed away as an anomaly in an otherwise ordinary employment. But 3 days later, when Nadia carried a tray of tea into the study for the evening rounds, she found Junho standing at the window with a photograph in his hand, and something in the set of his shoulders made her pause instead of simply setting the tray down and leaving. "You can go," he said without turning. "I do not need anything else tonight." "You've been standing like that for 20 minutes, Nadia said. "I watched you from the hallway. Whatever's in that photograph, it's not doing you any good." He turned then, and for the first time since she had started working in this house, she saw something other than control in his expression. Grief, old and carefully buried, surfacing despite whatever effort he usually spent keeping it below the surface. "My sister," he said, holding the photograph out, an unusual gesture from a man who rarely explained himself to anyone. "Su-Yun. She died 4 years ago. Tonight is the anniversary." Nadia set the tray down and crossed the room, taking the photograph carefully. A young woman smiled back at her, dark eyes bright with a warmth that seemed to have skipped directly to whatever lived beneath Jun-ho's usual stillness. What happened to her? She trusted a man who worked for a rival organization. He told her he loved her. He was gathering information the entire time. Jun-ho's voice stayed level, but something underneath it had gone very quiet and very cold. When the truth came out, our enemies used her to send me a message. I was 3 minutes too late reaching the warehouse where they held her.
Jonah.
She said his name without the honorific for the first time, and something in his expression shifted at the sound of it, subtle but unmistakable. I do not tell people this, he said. I am not certain why I am telling you. Maybe because I'm the only person in this house who's never repeated anything, Nadia said quietly, echoing his own words from the night of the fake engagement. You said so yourself. Something that was almost a smile, and almost was not, crossed his face. Perhaps that is exactly why. She should have left after that. Instead, she stayed another hour, listening while he talked, not about the business or the empire or the men who wanted him dead, but about a sister who had loved terrible music and worse jokes, about a childhood in Seoul before either of them had understood what their family truly was. It was the first time Nadia had seen him as something other than the man whose house she cleaned, and it frightened her more than the fake engagement ever had. 2 weeks passed in a strange, new rhythm, Jun-ho finding reasons to be in rooms Nadia was cleaning, asking questions about her life that had nothing to do with the mansion's operation, and Nadia finding herself answering more honestly than she intended to. She told herself it meant nothing, that a man like him collected small kindnesses the way he collected leverage, useful and disposable. But the way he said her name now, low and deliberate, like it was worth the extra half-second it cost him to say it right, told a different story than the one she kept repeating to herself in the mirror each morning. The danger arrived on a Tuesday, without warning, the way danger always seemed to in this house. Nadia was crossing the eastern courtyard with a basket of linens when the first gunshot cracked through the evening air, followed immediately by the shattering of glass from the direction of the front gate. She dropped low on instinct, years of city living teaching her body what to do before her mind caught up, and scrambled toward the nearest cover, a low stone wall bordering the garden. Shouting erupted from multiple directions, Korean and English tangled together, and through the chaos, she saw Jun-ho emerge from the house with a gun already in his hand, moving with a controlled speed that turned violence into something almost graceful. He fired twice toward the gate, precise and economical, and one of the intruders went down while the others scattered toward the eastern wall, exactly toward where Nadia crouched.
She did not think.
She grabbed a heavy garden urn from beside the wall and hurled it directly into the path of the nearest intruder, catching him across the shoulder hard enough to knock the weapon from his hand and send him staggering sideways into the hedge. It was not much, but it was enough of a distraction for one of Jun-ho's guards to close the distance and subdue him. Nadia. Jun-ho's voice cut through the noise, sharp with something she had never heard in it before, real fear rather than calculation. I'm fine, she called back, though her hands, when she looked at them, were shaking harder than she wanted to admit. He crossed the courtyard in seconds, positioning his body between her and the gate even after the immediate threat had scattered, his free hand closing around her arm with a grip that was equal parts protective and desperate. You should have run toward the house. There wasn't time, Nadia said. And you needed the distraction more than I needed to hide. Something in his expression cracked, just for a moment, the careful control slipping to reveal the raw edge underneath. You could have been killed. So could you, she said. Every single day, apparently, judging by tonight. The guards secured the perimeter, dragging the wounded intruder inside for questioning, and the courtyard slowly settled back into its usual silence, broken only by the distant sound of sirens that never actually turned down the street, because sirens in this neighborhood knew better than to investigate too closely. Jun-ho did not release her arm. Rival faction, he said finally, answering the question she had not yet asked. The Beck organization. They have won in my territory for 2 years. Tonight was a message that they are done waiting. Why now? Because Director Han's consortium recently agreed to expand our partnership, Jun-ho said. The Beck family sees that as a threat to their own position. They believe striking now, while I am distracted, gives them an advantage. Distracted by what? He looked at her for a long moment, something unguarded moving across his face that made her breath catch. By you, he said quietly. I have not been thinking clearly since the night of that fake engagement, Nadia. Everyone in this house has noticed. Apparently my enemies have too. The confession sat between them, heavier than either of them seemed prepared to carry. Nadia did not know what to say to a man who had just admitted, in the middle of a courtyard still smelling of gunpowder, that she had become a liability to his empire simply by existing in his line of sight too often. That's not my fault, she said finally. I did not say it was, Jun-ho said. I said it was true. He walked her back inside himself, his hand never quite leaving her arm, and left 2 additional guards stationed outside her room that night, a decision she did not argue with despite every instinct telling her she should. Sleep did not come easily. She kept replaying the moment his voice had cracked over her name, the fear in it that had nothing to do with strategy or leverage. The next danger came from inside the house, and it was worse. Nadia discovered it by accident, carrying fresh linens to the East Wing 3 nights later and overhearing a conversation through a half-open door that should have been closed. Rosalind's voice, usually so nervous and deferential, had dropped into something calculating and cold, speaking quietly into a phone in a language Nadia did not understand except for one word she recognized clearly enough: Beck. She froze in the hallway, linens forgotten in her arms, understanding with sudden and total clarity that Rosalind, the assistant who had pinned Nadia into a borrowed dress with shaking hands, was feeding information to the very organization that had attacked the mansion 3 nights ago. Nadia did not confront her. Every instinct she had built working in dangerous houses told her that confrontation now would only get her killed before she could tell anyone what she knew. Instead, she backed away slowly, heart hammering, and went directly to find Jun-ho. She found him in the study, and the words spilled out of her faster than she intended. The location, the language, the single name she had caught before backing away. Jun-ho's face went very still, the particular stillness she now recognized as the most dangerous version of him. You are certain, he said. Rosalind. I heard her say Beck. I heard the tone of her voice change the second she thought no one was listening. Jun-ho was quiet for a long moment, some internal calculation working behind his eyes. She has been with this family for 6 years. She helped raise my sister after our mother passed. I know how this sounds, Nadia said carefully. I know what I'm asking you to believe about someone you trust. But I'm not lying to you, Jun-ho. I've never lied to you. Something in his expression shifted, the weight of an old wound colliding with a new one. I know, he said quietly. That is exactly why I believe you, and exactly why this is going to break something in this house that has been standing for a very long time. He moved that same night, quiet and methodical, gathering proof before confronting anyone, and Nadia found herself pulled into the investigation despite every attempt to stay on the edges of it. What they uncovered was worse than either of them expected. Rosalind had been feeding the Beck organization information for over a year, ever since her brother had racked up a debt to them that Jun-ho's organization had refused to cover. I did what I had to do, Rosalind said, when Jun-ho finally confronted her in the same study where he had once shown Nadia his sister's photograph, 2 guards flanking the door. You would not help my brother. They offered to forgive his debt in exchange for information. What was I supposed to do? You could have come to me, Jun-ho said, and his voice carried none of the volume Nadia expected, only a terrible quiet certainty. Instead, you gave them the layout of this house. You gave them the schedule that let them time an attack when a woman under my protection was standing in an open courtyard. Rosalind's eyes flicked toward Nadia, something like guilt crossing her face for the first time. I did not know they would attack while she was outside. That is not the same as innocence, Jun-ho said. Nadia watched the scene unfold with a strange, hollow feeling in her chest, understanding in real time that she had just changed the entire direction of this house by carrying a basket of linens down the wrong hallway at the wrong moment. She had not asked for this power, this ability to alter the fate of people she barely knew, but here it was, sitting heavy in her hands regardless. Jun-ho did not have Rosalind killed. He exiled her instead, Her brother's debt paid in full as a final act of the loyalty she had betrayed, a mercy Nadia suspected few men in his position would have extended. When the study finally emptied, Junho sank into the chair behind his desk, the exhaustion of the last several days finally visible on his face for the first time since Nadia had known him. "You saved this entire house," he said quietly. "Do you understand that?" "I just repeated something I overheard," Nadia said. "You said I never do that. Guess tonight I broke my own rule." "Thank God you did." He looked up at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression that she had only seen once before, the night with his sister's photograph. "I have built my entire life around trusting almost no one, Nadia. And the one person who has never given me a reason to doubt her is a woman I hired to clean my floors and then dragged into a fake engagement because I did not know who else to trust." "That's not the most romantic origin story." "No," Junho agreed, something almost like a real smile touching his mouth. "But it is an honest one." He stood, crossing the space between them slowly, and this time when he reached her, he did not stop at a respectful distance the way he always had before. His hand came up, brushing along her jaw with a gentleness that did not match anything the rest of the house had ever seen from him. "I have spent 4 years since my sister died refusing to let anyone close enough to matter," he said. "I told myself it was strategy, protecting myself the way I failed to protect her. But it was fear, Nadia. Plain fear, dressed up as discipline. And now I do not know how to stop thinking about you," he said quietly. "I have tried. I am not very good at it." The words landed the way his sister's photograph had, quiet and devastating, and Nadia understood she was standing at the edge of something she could still walk away from, or something she could choose with both eyes open. She thought of the courtyard, of throwing a garden urn without hesitation to protect a man she had known for less than a year, of the 8 months before that spent learning every corner of this house without ever once feeling like it was truly hers. "I'm not scared of what you are," she said finally. "I'm scared of how much I don't mind that you're it." Something in his face broke open at that, the last of his careful control giving way, and when he kissed her it was slow and certain, nothing like the desperate grip of his hand on her arm in the courtyard, everything like the quiet honesty of a man finally admitting what he wanted out loud. The peace lasted 11 days. It ended when the Beck organization, desperate after losing their inside source, made one final and reckless move, a direct assault not on the mansion but on Nadia herself, intercepted on what should have been an ordinary trip to the market 3 streets from the estate. She saw them coming, 2 men moving too deliberately through the crowd, and she did the only thing her instincts allowed, breaking into a run toward the crowded intersection where witnesses would make an abduction harder to execute cleanly. It was not enough. A hand closed around her arm, dragging her toward a waiting car, and Nadia fought with everything she had, driving her elbow back into the man's ribs hard enough to hear him grunt, twisting free for 3 full seconds before the second man caught her from the other side. Then Junho's guards arrived, alerted by a shopkeeper who recognized the mansion's car, had the sense to call ahead, and the 2 men scattered before the abduction could complete, leaving Nadia shaking but unharmed on the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers who had no idea what they had just witnessed. Junho arrived himself 20 minutes later, and the look on his face when he found her standing upright, furious rather than broken, was something Nadia would remember for the rest of her life. He did not simply embrace her. He gripped her shoulders and studied every inch of her, checking for injury with a thoroughness that bordered on desperate, before finally pulling her against his chest with a force that told her exactly how close to breaking he had come in those 20 minutes. "This ends now," he said into her hair, voice low and absolutely final. "Tonight.
Junho.
I have given this organization patience it does not deserve," he said, pulling back to look at her. "The Beck family miscalculated when they went after my territory. They made a fatal error the moment they put their hands on you. I'm not asking you to go to war for me." "You do not have to ask," Junho said. "I already decided the moment I saw those men grab your arm." The confrontation that followed was nothing like the careful diplomatic sit-down of the Han Consortium negotiation. This was territory war, swift and merciless, Junho moving against the Beck organization's holdings with a precision that left no room for the kind of drawn-out conflict that destroyed entire families over years. Nadia insisted on being present at the final meeting, not as decoration this time, but as a woman who had earned her place in the room through everything she had already survived. The Beck family's leader, a broad-shouldered man named Director Beck, who carried himself with the confidence of someone used to winning, met them in a warehouse near the docks, the kind of neutral ground that satisfied no one but prevented immediate bloodshed. "You came for a housemaid," Director Beck said, eyes flicking toward Nadia with open contempt. "This is beneath you, Junho." "She is not a housemaid," Junho said, and his voice carried the particular quiet that Nadia had learned meant real danger was seconds away. "She is the woman I intend to marry, and you sent men to drag her off a public street in broad daylight. There is no version of this conversation where that survives without consequence." Director Beck's composure flickered for the first time.
"Mary.
"A housemaid. A woman worth more than your entire organization," Junho said. "You attacked my home. You corrupted a member of my staff. And when both of those failed, you put your hands on someone under my protection. The commission does not need me to explain why that ends today." Nadia stepped forward before anyone could stop her, drawing every eye in the room, and set a folder on the table between them. The evidence she and Junho had spent the last 11 days compiling, Rosalind's confession, financial records tracing Beck money into the attack on the estate, security footage from the courtyard shooting. "Everything in here goes to the commission whether you agree to withdraw or not," Nadia said, her voice steady despite the danger radiating off every man in the room. "The only question is whether you walk out of this warehouse with your territory intact or without it. That part is up to you." Director Beck studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes as he recalculated whatever assumptions he had walked in with. "You let her speak for you," he said to Junho, disbelief coloring his voice. "I do not let her do anything," Junho said. "She speaks because she has earned the right to, and you would do well to listen." The negotiation that followed was brief and absolute, Director Beck's organization withdrawing entirely from the territory dispute in exchange for the evidence never reaching the commission, an outcome that left him diminished but alive, a mercy Nadia suspected he did not entirely deserve, but one that matched the man she had come to know over these past weeks. Someone who understood the difference between necessary violence and violence for its own sake. When they finally left the warehouse, the night air felt different against Nadia's skin, lighter somehow, the weight of the last several weeks finally beginning to lift. "You called me the woman you intend to marry," she said, as they walked toward the car. "In front of an entire room of dangerous men." "I did," Junho said. "That's a big claim to make without asking me first." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully, something vulnerable moving across his features despite the danger they had just walked out of. "Then let me ask you properly. Nadia Coleman, I am not offering you $10,000 this time. I am offering you everything else, the house, the danger, the weight of what I am, all of it if you'll still have me." Nadia looked at him for a long moment, this man who had once ordered her into a car with 6 minutes' notice and a fake engagement, who had shown her his dead sister's photograph on an anniversary he told no one else about, who had gripped her shoulders on a sidewalk like she was the only solid thing left in his world. "Ask me again when we're not standing outside a warehouse that smells like motor oil," she said. "But the answer is yes. It's been yes for a while now." He kissed her then, on a dock in the last hour before dawn, and this time there were no consortium men watching, no performance required, nothing but the truth of two people who had chosen each other through every version of danger this city could throw at them. 6 months later, Nadia still moved through the mansion with the same quiet competence she always had, though her days looked different now, less polishing brass handles and more sitting beside Junho during meetings he once would have handled entirely alone, her instincts for reading a room proving as valuable in his world as they had ever been in a hospital corridor she had once imagined for herself before this life found her instead. One evening, standing on the same eastern courtyard wall where she had once thrown a garden urn to save a stranger's guard, Junho slid his hand into hers, watching the sun set over territory that was, for the first time in years, entirely secure. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. The night I dragged you into a lie with 6 minutes' notice? No, Nadia said, and meant it completely. That night gave me the truth eventually. That's more than most lies ever do. He lifted her hand, pressing his lips against her knuckles the way he had learned to do without ever quite explaining where the gesture came from, and neither of them said anything else for a long while, because nothing else needed saying. The house stood quiet and secure around them, and somewhere inside it, a woman who had once been invisible in her own workplace now stood beside the most dangerous man in the city, not rescued, not conquered, simply chosen, and choosing right back, every single day since. If this story kept you hooked until the very last word, hit that like button and subscribe for more, because there are plenty more dangerous men and the women brave enough to stand their ground waiting for you. Drop a comment and tell me exactly which moment made your heart stop. I read every single one. See you in the next story.